All right, in this training, we're going to use an address verification tool. It's an API by Smarty US Addresses Verification. Um, One of the ways that we want to use this is to be able to provide a list of addresses and get back uh, information from the API with kind of a cleaned up address. This can be useful to verify potentially if employee addresses are valid, if they're mailable, if they're residential versus commercial. Also, if we want to look up vendor addresses, potentially we want to make sure that those addresses are for a commercial address and not residential. That could be something that would be a higher risk we might want to research. The other thing you can use it for is also in the conflict of interest testing. If we want to compare employee addresses against vendor addresses, it's useful to have a consistent format that it comes back in. So we can provide addresses written slightly differently to this tool, and it will research it against their database and return the address that it most likely is, kind of like you would see in Google. But this will allow us to do a lot of addresses using Python and kind of automate that whole process. All right, so this is the files that are in my example workbook that I provided a link on my blog. I'll try and put it in the description. We'll go ahead and launch Jupyter Notebook so that we can look at what this address verification code looks like. All right, so open the notebook. All right. So before I go over the code, I will say the first thing you need to do is come into Smarty US address verification. And just to kind of give like a demo of how it works, we can provide it an address and we can click view results. So, we didn't give it a zip code, but it went ahead and verified this information. And it corrected the zip code and it fixed an abbreviation, right? So we had drive, it's going to return it as DR, okay? It also gives us longitude, latitude, it gives us area on a map. And then this is all the detailed information that it gives us. Some of the big things is kind of enhanced match. This is a postal match. That means that it can receive mail. It's a valid postal address from the US Postal Code. And then we can also see that it's residential. You might have some usefulness for these other items, and I'll kind of show you how we in Python we can get those information back. All right, but I will say you'll need to kind of sign up for a free account. They give you 30 days and 1,000 lookups in their free account. And then it is paid if you want to do it across a lot of addresses, a lot of information, and you're going to use it beyond the 30 days. There have a lot of different pricing structures, but you're going to want the US address verification. That's the one we're using in this training. All right. So once we've set up that account, we will create some credentials in the account setup. But once we've done that part, we will need to install the package, the Smarty Python package, and we'll do it using this in the Jupyter Notebook. It just pip install and Smart Streets Python SDK is what they have it called. All right, and then it'll create kind of this code and it'll say if it's been successfully installed. Since mine already has it installed, it's saying that their requirements are already satisfied. So then I'm going to import Smarty and Pandas just so that we can use the API, and we're going to save it eventually into a Pandas data frame so we can save it to Excel and export it. All right, so whenever we imported our addresses list that we had in our folder, right here, it had a list of addresses, right? So we just have a few for our example. We're going to provide each of these addresses to the API and get the results. All right, so just for convenience, we did convert it to a list right here. So we have a list of addresses we're going to provide it. This is the authentication code that you'll create. And you'll create that after you create your account for the first time. And then you can go to API key and it will show you, you can create a authentication code. It'll provide it to you. And then on this one, went ahead and deleted this just so everyone won't use it. But this is where you'll put your authentication code and authentication token. All right. Then this is how you establish those credentials and connect to their client, the API. Now, this is just an example of looking up one address, so I'm just going to send it this address using its usstreet.lookup, and I'm going to use the lookup enhanced. I'm going to do this because we need enhanced to bring back residential or commercial, which I think is useful information. All right, then it's going to execute that lookup, and we're going to save the results of that lookup onto first candidate. All right, now we're just going to print. This is just printing the information. They have a lot of items a lot of information you can get back. I thought this was all the useful items. So you don't need to type it. You can just download the workbook and do it. But also I do have this information here where you can go to the website and it'll give you more definition on what the output means. So it gives you a lot of definitions of what it is and how the information is going to come back and what the information looks like. Okay. So whenever I ran this for the example file we were looking at, it's going to return a lot of this information, but so we provided an address. Again, this one is very similar. We did not have the zip code. Right? We didn't have zip code, and we had it spelled out like drive. And what it returned to us is with it abbreviated. So it'll be, if you have it with DR and your vendor file and drive and your employee file, it's going to return it back consistently. And then it's also going to return the state, zip code, and last four of zip code. And it's going to return like addressee. So if it's a business, it'll include a name here. Now, if you want the individual data points broken out, it does have like the address number. If it has like directions before and after the street name, it'll have it here, and so on. So you can have the individual items broken out. The other item that we are looking for is going to be whether it's residential or commercial. That's going to be on this RDI is what they have it called. So residential is what this address is. All right, the next step that I did was I just created a function. So this function is going to take the address and it's going to return a data frame with all this information. You don't need to type it out. It's all going to be in the Jupyter notebook. But hopefully, if you are more interested, you can look at how the code is working to get an idea of, how potentially you can modify it. But I think it'll return all the information that we generally would want as an auditor. All right. So basically, I kind of am giving it an example again. This is a different address, and it's going to return the data frame and the results. This one is actually not a valid address, and it's just so whenever we sent it, it actually didn't return anything. I do make sure that I include that in the comment that we'll eventually export to Excel, but it's going to have a lot of blank information in it. But that's one of our address items. So we're going to send each of these addresses, and we're going to get the information returned, and then I've combined it into one big data frame. So this will work for 5, this will work for 1,000, or if you bought more, it'll work for, however many you need to run. So afterwards, it only takes maybe a second for each one to run. And then we have all the results saved here. Okay, so we have a data frame with all the columns listed out. These are the addresses that we inputted, the information. And we can kind of look to see, okay, of these 5 items that we sent, we'll filter down for residential. So these 2 addresses are residential. We might want to research those. Again, that column name is RDI is what they have it called. They also have some other enhanced match items that I think are useful for identifying if an address is potentially not deliverable. So if we have an address and it's matched, but it doesn't find it in actually the postal information, it's going to have this non-postal match. So you can see that here. We might want to research. Maybe we expect an address that it's actually valid and we can deliver to. Why do we have addresses in here that don't? All right, some of the other items are none, missing secondary list, or unknown secondary. So basically it's looking for potentially a suite or an apartment number, and it's not necessarily finding it, or it's not correct. You can definitely go look at their documentation um, to see if what the different types it's returning, and see if those are things that you might want to research on. But these are all the items that are non-postal matches. So basically, it didn't have a match in the postal office exactly. So this one is just missing secondary. So it does find this address, but potentially just missing a suite or apartment number. All right. And then this other item here, I'm just searching for where the delivery line returned nothing. So when it's returning nothing, that means it didn't actually find a result. Um, Usually this means it's not a valid address, and I know that this isn't a valid address because I just made it up. And basically whenever that happens, I have it defined to go ahead and add this comment, just so when we dump it to Excel, we'll be able to kind of see this comment and kind of help ourselves understand. You can also go look at the demo if you just kind of want to see what it looks like whenever you put this information in. So we can kind of see what that looks like by going here, bring the information in. See, so it's an unknown address. It didn't actually return it. It's not sure what that is. So it's not even close to something that it has in its database as a valid address. So we might want to research that and figure out, why do we have an invalid address in our data. And then this last little piece of code is just going to export it to Excel. It's going to call address verification results. And that way you can have an Excel so you can read it on your own, you can provide it to somebody else, and you can do further analysis if you need to. All right, so that's kind of all I plan on going over today, just on how this works. If you do have any questions or comments, feel free to post a comment or just reach out to me on LinkedIn. But I appreciate you guys watching the video. Have a good one.